Hello, everybody. Welcome to another amazing, wonderful, fantastic webinar. I hope that everyone is having an amazing day so far. So, if you are here with me live, guess what? Type in the chat, hit that like button, hit subscribe, do all those things that help us over here at the Pass Buddy team because it really does help us out, helps us reach more people so that we can keep putting out content like this. Today, listen to what we're going to be going over today. Today, we're going to be going over math. And I just want to tell you, first and foremost, if you haven't already, head on over to passbuddy.com. Go ahead and do that because that's where we have all of our tips, all of our tricks. Guess what? All of our webinars are in our members section. So if you wanted to see when we went live today, you could have emailed yourself reminders. And we also have all recordings of our past webinars there for you so that you could really just easily find stuff. You could type something in, like you could type in, property ownership, and there you have a couple of the webinars that we already have that are recorded, and you could just click it, watch it, and it would be there for you to be able to enjoy. And you'll be able to see all of our upcoming webinars as well. So, so when we go to the dashboard, if we go to webinars, you'll see the ones that we're live right now. So obviously, clearly, that would be something that you could just click the live stream, join us here, and remember, if you are here with us live, do hit that like button, hit subscribe. But today is math, and I like writing math questions as we're going along and as we're doing this. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to have my math right up here, and then we'll bring in the handy dandy calculator when we need to. But let's take a look at this first question, and then we'll talk about some tips, some tricks that will help you pass your real estate exam, especially the math section. So this first one says, Bob sold a home for 450,000. If he has a 60-40 split with Hometown Realty and they took in a total commission of 4.5%, how much did Bob make? So, a couple of things. So, I first and foremost want to talk about tips and tricks for the math section to help you be successful. And I want you to write these down because I think that these are important. And if you do them every single time, okay? Even when you're practicing, I don't care how easy the question might be for you. I want you to do these things every single time you're doing a math question. So, first thing is this: you want to save your math for the end. Write that down. And I'm going to tell you the reasons why I always tell my students to save their math for the end. Okay. One of the biggest reasons is I find that students, when they do the math together, they are actually going to have they're going to be on somewhat of a rhythm, and it might help you get some more questions right than wrong. Okay. So what happens is students will tend to have a rhythm. They're in a groove per se with the math, and they're just going to be like, and that sets you up for the most success, right? So if you're think of it this way, right? If you're studying for your real estate exam and you're doing all property ownership questions, right? You tend to maybe get in a groove. Whereas opposed to when you do like a master exam or something like that, what happens is you tend to focus solely on, you know, solely on the one section. You tend to, like I said, get into a groove versus when they're all scattered around. So what you want to do for the test, any question that has a number as an answer, you want to get yourself to a point where what you're doing is you're setting yourself up for the most success. You're basically saying, hey, you know what? I'm going to try to artificially create a groove or a rhythm for myself and lump all the math questions together. Because it might be harder for you to do that with other sections, like, oh, is this leasing? Oh, is this, that? That's why I'm like, I don't tell my students to focus on that. But what I do ask them to focus on is, hey, the math questions, if there is a number as an answer, I know that that's typically, generally speaking, a math question. You're going to have to do some arithmetic. So we're going to go ahead and do that. The next thing is, I always like writing down what we have. So, like, what do we know here as far as this question? And I'm going to write a little text box here. And Oh, that is a bad color. So we're going to go to a pen. And I like going to a pen here because let's see, let me get my fancy dancy doodler in here. Okay. So what happens is this. Okay. We know that the home is listed for was sold for 450,000, right? We also know that he's on a 60-40 split. Okay. And we also know that this is a 4.5% commission that's going to be owed to Hometown Realty. Okay. So, all of these things, this is what we know, this is what we're working with. Okay. And they want to know how much did Bob make? So, ultimately, we want to know what his paycheck would be. So, the first thing that I would say that we would do now, for the sake of space that I have, I'm going to erase some things now because now you have that written down on your notepad. Okay. And we're going to go ahead and start doing some arithmetic. So the first thing that we want to do is figure out how much did Hometown Realty make, right? How much did they make on this sale? So, and the commission is always based off the sale price. So certain questions might actually say to you, hey, it was listed at this, they offered this, and then they negotiated to this. It's always what it sold for. So 450,000, okay, is what it sold for. Okay. And then we know that they took in a total commission of 4.5%. So if you ever try to find a number, a percent of a number, right? A percent of a number is going to be multiplication. So here's something that I always like to tell students: of equals multiplication, per equals division. So if you're trying to find the percent of a number, we're going to be multiplying, right? If it's per, you're going to be doing division. So now 4.5% as a decimal. So a lot of you struggle with this where the decimal would be. Okay. I want to show you a little trick. Okay. And the trick actually was shown to be my Mrs. Stu. Mrs. Stu showed me this trick, and and she told me that this is actually a perfect way to describe this, and help people that struggle with the with actually converting the percentage to a decimal. So you ready? So situation is this: 4.5%. We said per is division. Cent, like a century, is 100. Watch this. 4.5% is 4.5 per divided century, 100. And look at this. It is going to be, we're going to just draw that in there, 0.045. So if we were calculating this, right? So we know that 4.5% as a decimal is 0.045. Multiply that by 450,000 equals 20,250. Now, stew tip, listen to me. Listen to me carefully. 450,000 times 0.045. Why did I do it twice? Listen to me very carefully. I am a smarty pants. Okay. I am a smarty pants. Also, Mrs. Stu is a smarty pants. We could easily do these things in our head. We don't. Well, let me rephrase this. There's some things that we could do in our head. Something like this, maybe not. We would have to get some scratch paper down. But what I'm going to tell you is this: no matter how many times you're like, I could do this in my head, or you know what, I'm going to go with the first time that I did it. You have the butterfingers. You're going to be nervous. You're going to be struggling on the test. What I'm going to tell you is this: I need you to punch it in 2 times. I don't care. And do it when you practice, because if you don't do it when you practice, you are going to not do it on the test. Okay? When you practice, punch it into your calculator multiple times. And I always show you that. So it's 20,250. So we're going to write that down here. That is, okay, how much money the realty took in. Now, we have to figure out how much Bob made. So, how much did Bob make? And I see someone typed in the chat said, "Thank you." You're quite welcome. I love doing this. Listen, I'm always here to help you guys out. And something else I'm going to say is remember, hit that like button, hit subscribe, and also head on over to passbuddy.com because that is where we're going to have all of our practice exam questions, things like that. So, 20,250 is what they took in. Now, Bob is on a 60-40 split. So let's talk about what that means, okay? Typically, generally speaking, the first number is what Bob would make, okay? Now, they might word it a little differently. It might be a little funky in your word question, but that is what, when we say a 50-50 split, a 70-30 split, the first number is what the agent or the salesperson is going to make, okay? So we want to find 60% of this number. So what I want to ask you is this. If we're trying to find 60% of a number, right? If we're trying to find 60% of 20,250, okay? What would we do? What is the arithmetic that we would do in regards to this? Okay? What is the arithmetic that we would do in regards to this? Okay? So what we would do is we would be multiplying, okay, the 60%, right, by 20,250. So let's go ahead and do that. 60%. And now if you don't know, right? If you don't know the what was I going to say? The what the decimal is, right? Remember what the trick was that Mrs. Stu told us about, right? Percent. Okay. So 20,250 equals, and now 60% as a decimal is 60 divided by 100. Now listen to me. I'm going to tell you something, okay? Don't be afraid, okay? Don't be afraid to go ahead and use your calculator, okay? I think a lot of students fear using the calculator, or they think it's a crutch, or they think it's something that is to be looked on negative. Like, oh, if I can't know how to convert 60% as a decimal, like there's like that's looking down on themselves, right? They're like, no, 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 I should be able to do this. I don't care. I do it. I would put that into my calculator every time, so I'm sure that I have the right answer. Okay? I'm sure that I have the right answer because tools are made to help you get to where you need to be with limited errors, right? So that's why use it for your benefit. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to plug this into our calculator to see the answer we get. Ready? So zero point 0.6 times 20,250 equals 12,150. Now, we're going to do it one more time. Zero point 0.6 times 20,250 equals $12,150. And that is how much Bob would have made on the sale of this home. So now, what I want you to do is this. If you're here with me live, feel free to type in any kind of questions that you would like to see me do because I'm going to type in another one. Okay, so let's erasey. And this is something that I used to do webinars like this for math a lot, and I would just type some questions up right as we're going. So this was like a really special thing when I did, these particular. We're gonna keep Bob up there, okay? Bob is selling his home, okay? He wants to net 40,000 after the sale. He has a mortgage of 120,000. Okay. And there is to be 7%. Oh, we're gonna go backwards. Let me see if I could undo that. Well, he has, I think I said $120,000 mortgage. This is the only negative to this is sometimes the butterfingers happen. He has 120,000 and has to pay 7% commission. How much must his home sell for? Okay, so this is what we would refer to as a seller net problem. Now, students traditionally typically have a really hard time with this particular question. Now, and I'll tell you where a lot of students go wrong in this question, right? Because there's one place that almost every student traditionally has a problem with, okay? And I want you to be able to get yourself past that so that you could get to a point where you recognize that issue that everyone seems to have and you're like, hey, that's me, I'm one of those people, and we do it the right way. So let's talk about this. Okay, now there are two directions that you could go in with these types of questions, and I always say that, right? The first direction is this: you could look at the you could look at the the answers, right, and work backwards. And I think a lot of students, you know do the working backwards. They take each of the answers. They'll take answer A, B, C, and D, and then they'll just basically say, okay, we're going to take out a 7% commission. We're going to say that he has to pay 120,000, and then if he's left with 140,000 after that, right, that is a correct answer. So yes, that is one way you could do it. Now, if you are that student and that is how you're going about this, I'm okay with that. I don't think that the other way, working through it where you don't do that trial and error, I don't think that that's any better, because it's a situation where the only thing that would be different is that it would take more time. Okay? So I try to tell my students, look, if you are pressed for time, right? And most students on average are not. I would say that's a tough way to go about it. However, it's something I don't steer my students away from it. So let's talk about this, right? So, would we all agree? So, the first thing that we need to do is this: we need to write down. So, on your piece of paper, you should be writing down that he wants to net 40,000. He has a $120,000 mortgage. It should say mortgage. I didn't put that in there. I'm not going back. He has a $120,000 mortgage that he needs to pay off, and he has to pay a 7% commission. Okay. So you should be writing that down. Okay. And the 7% commission. Now, in these seller net problems, okay, the first thing I'm going to tell you is it doesn't really matter what these numbers are for. So, like the 40,000 that he has to net, this is a mortgage. It doesn't matter. It could be a water bill. It could be this. This is something that the sale needs to yield this. Okay. It doesn't matter what it's for. It's the sale needs to yield that. Okay. The sale needs to yield that. So, what we're going to do is this: we're going to just go ahead and add those numbers up. And if there were more numbers there, we would add all those numbers up. So 40,000 plus 120,000, because we know he needs to get this much from the sale, right? He needs to get that much from the sale. So, minimally, and listen to me very carefully. Are we going to be punching it into our calculator? No, Jose. No way, Jose. We're always going to punch it into our calculator. Absolutely 100%. I mean, yes, we're going to punch it into our calculator. I was meant to say, are we going to use our head and just like do the math in our head? You can tell I haven't had my coffee yet this morning. So it's 160,000 is the amount that minimally we need to start with, okay? So let's just punch that into our calculator again. Because again, the temptation is there. That's why I always tell my students as I'm going through these questions, the temptation is always there that you're like, hey, I could do 120,000 plus 40,000 in my head. I could do that. And I want to just break you of that. That's why a lot of my math videos is more so conditioning you into good habits. Okay. Conditioning you into really good habits. Okay. Meaning that what we're trying to do is just get you to a place where um, you're going in there with the tools, tips, and tricks to set you up for the most success in that math section, right? So it's going to be 160,000. Now I'm going to draw this in here. 160,000 is what he needs to make. Now, here's where a lot of my students go wrong. This is the pitfall. Okay, so most students do that right. Okay, now I'm going to ask you, because this is where they get tripped up. Okay, the 7% commission. What is our commission always based off of? And type it into the chat if you're here with me live. If you want to participate, play the at-home game show. What is the commission always based off of? Because I said it in the last question. It's always based off the sale price, right? It's always based off the sale price. So my question is this the sale price? Is this the sale price? Now, a lot of you typically are going to say in the chat, I know exactly what you're going to say. No, Stu, that's not the sale price. If that was the sale price, we would be done. We would be donezo gonzo, going home, packing our bags, have the answer to the question. That's, however, not the sale price. So now we have to think to ourselves, if that's not the sale price, how do we get the sale price? So would we not agree on this? I'm going to show you something that might be difficult for you to understand. However, I'm going to try to explain it. So wouldn't that be how much he has to make after paying a 7% commission? Yeah, absolutely, 100%. This would be what he needs to make after paying a 7% commission. So now, if we have a number, and just follow me on this, if we have a number, and we're like, okay, this number equals this less 7%, okay, wouldn't we say that that number is equal to 93% of that number we don't know? So think about this. 93% of, which is multiply, that unknown number, which is what the home must sell for, right? And we'll let that be X because, in math, we usually give, letters to different numbers that are unknown, X, Y, Z, things like that. So if you remember algebra, like this is literally, I think I could remember my 8th grade class. I'm sure that, yeah, I'm going to say may he rest in peace, Mr. Tuttle. Uh, so he was up there in age when I was in middle school. So I appreciate your math lessons. They've lived with me. Obviously, I'm making money off of it, so it did come in handy. Now, let's look at this. So 93% of the sale price equals 160,000. So now the question is this: how do we figure out X? So we have to isolate it. We have to basically get ourselves to a place where we we get it by itself, right? So 93%, we're going to go ahead and divide, and it cancels out on this side. And then you have 93% here. So the math that we have to do, let's get our handy dandy calculator back up, okay, is 160,000 divided by 93%. So 93% as a decimal is 0.93 per century. Okay. And that would be $172,043.01. So it's probably going to just, in the answers, they might just keep it as a flat number and not keep the penny in there. But let's do it one more time. So 160,000 divided by 0.93, and just keep putting it into your calculator multiple times as you're practicing so that this becomes habit, right? This becomes habit forming. So $172,043 is how much the home must sell for. So listen, I hope that this helped you out. We have more math problems going on. We do YouTube shorts. We are on our TikTok channel. We do math problems. So check us out. We're Pass Buddy. Okay, that's who we are. I am nothing more than a figment of your imagination and the driving force behind Pass Buddy. So that is what I am. I don't even like, it's something that I really do love what we're doing at Pass Buddy, because this is an opportunity for me to really create content for you that is stuff that I believe is helpful for the real to help you pass the real estate exam. I'm able to update things, change things, add questions, and that's important to me and my students. So that's why in places that I've worked at before, it's a situation where I didn't have that control. I didn't have that as, a way for me to get you better content, updated content, new stuff. So that's why if you head over to passbuddy.com, you will be able to see all my newest, latest, greatest, all my thoughts, questions, quizzes to help you pass your real estate exam. So everybody, listen, have a great, fantastic, wonderful rest of your day. Remember, hit that like button, hit subscribe, and I will see you all real soon. Have a great one, everybody.